Hello everybody. What happened to employee benefits? It's more difficult to obtain and retain a good job in today's globally competitive environment. That certainly is one that's a common occurrence for just about anybody. Another common occurrence has been the stagnating wages for most people and less benefits in the workplace. In fact, there's some really interesting statistics, though sad, that talk about the falling benefits that are provided to employees today. In the early 1980s, about 40% of employees had a pension plan that was paid for by their employer. Today, that figure's 11%. Interestingly, about 80% of those who work for the government, federal employees, police officers, teachers, had a pension plan largely paid by the government. Unfortunately, the private sector has not done as well. In the early 1980s, almost 70 to 80% of employees had to pay at least a portion of their pension costs. Much higher than several years ago, 30 years ago, when only 20% did. Less than half the American workforce is covered by employer-sponsored healthcare plans. In fact, most employees got their healthcare from their employer. Now it's less than half. The U.S. is projected to spend about 19% of its gross domestic product on health insurance alone, more than any industrialized nation, at least in the same categories. For instance, Switzerland spends 11% of its gross domestic product on insurance, on health expenses. 10% is spent in Canada, and 10% as well in France. Social Security costs have risen exponentially for both employers and employees. When Social Security was first introduced in 1935, the tax rate was 1%. By 2005, it had risen to 13.4%, which is 6.2% for the employer and 6.2% for the employee. Social Security costs have risen more than 20 times since its inception, and that's the percentage, not the dollar amount, the percentage. And the program is still trillions of dollars in debt. The government hasn't identified a funding source to make up for the lack of revenues in the Social Security fund. Why is that? When Social Security was first passed, they had almost 30 people paying into the program for every one recipient. Today, there's less than 3. By 2030, there's only going to be 2 workers paying into the system for every one that's receiving benefits. Hardly a sustainable program. During the 1980s, plans such as 401k were introduced and grew rapidly. Companies who offered these plans, such as Southwest and Walmart, were able to lower their retirement costs. Other companies offered defined benefit programs such as United and General Motors, and they were unable to compete with these higher benefit structures. This contrasts with the 1940s and 50s, when most companies offered the same retirements, and so the costs were spread evenly throughout the industry. Not anymore. So while Southwest and Walmart have 401k programs, United and General Motors are moving that way as well. They simply can't compete with the higher benefit costs. Employee benefit costs have soared. They've spiraled in some ways out of control. And this caused some organizations to lose their competitive edge and advantage, and subsequent reductions for employees. Employees now have assumed a greater burden for their benefits, which is a dramatic reversal in the 1950s and 60s. It's been a dramatic reversal for those seeking the American dream as well, making the journey to financial freedom and personal independence more challenging. But success can still be achieved and attained for those in the marketplace today. However, they're going to have to do it on their own. Everybody enjoy the day.